is the Open Podcast, where your host, Sander Mangel, and his guests share strategies and insights to help digital agencies thrive in a changing world. In this episode, Sander talks with Guido Jansen, community builder and Sifa.id creator.
Guido, bit of a full circle moment here. My first podcast I personally recorded was back in, I think, 2018, probably even earlier.
17, 18,
Might
something
have
like that, yeah.
Should have looked that up properly. Was together
Nice
with
research.
you.
Nice research. Yes.
Yeah, yes. You're woefully unprepared for this show, and now I can invite you back on this show. So that's
Very nice.
it's a good full circle moment. We're going to talk about community today. You have been pretty much on all sides of the aisle, agency, merchant, most recently even the platform side.
Yes.
Throughout most of it, you have been involved in one way or the other with communities, either tech, CRO, what have you. You've participated in them. You've organized a bunch of stuff, events, including Me Magenta Netherlands, of which I had the pleasure to participate and co-organize alongside of you.
Yeah, I nicely lured you into that one, right?
Yes, I
welcome.
tend to say yes too quickly. And now you're even building a new startup that is, I would say, somewhat adjacent for people to take back ownership, right, of their professional profiles. And I think we'll talk about that a bit more towards the end. But let's maybe start at the beginning, at the early days of community and what that looked like, because there was something different about it, I want to say. It was especially around open source languages and platforms. There was a movement. And what's more important, I think, this was something that allowed an ecosystem of businesses to grow around this, right? It was not just people being altruistic. There was business to be had. What were those early days like?
So when I started with open source communities, it was like beginning of 2000s. So it was I was basically trying or looking for like a CMS for my own website. And I came across a system called Mambo, which later turned into Joomla, which in itself is a whole fascinating open source ripping itself apart from a commercial vendor kind of story. But that's where it started for me. So I mean, open source communities started way before that, but that was my introduction to them. So I spent a couple of years doing that with Joomla, and then indeed in 2008 came across Magento, which I found also very interesting in combination with my background in cognitive psychology and online behavior, and there's just way more money going around in e-commerce. Has its own it has its benefits in terms of the business, but also has its interesting sides for the psychology and the behavior part, which I found very interesting. But for the community part, it's there's a lot of things. I mean, we've all seen those XKCD drawings where there's this whole pile of shit and this one little block underneath it all supporting it. And often those, and that's not really an exaggeration. I think that there's a lot of systems where they're lean on some kind of open source basis that's maintained by volunteers basically. And there's all kinds of tooling from tooling that you use on your desktop or your phone that's open source. I mean, if you use Android, that had an open source basis. Again, long story. But there's a lot of open source tools that you might use or that people build upon. All the websites you use, they're probably, or most of them are probably running on a Linux server, right? And that's open source. So there's a lot of generic tools that people build just because they needed it for their work or for whatever their hobby project was. And by open sourcing it, as in making it available for other people to not only use but also contribute to, you create communities around that, right? So you have people contributing to that, and that can be for me. I mean, again, I'm a psychologist, so I'm not a hardcore developer, especially not 25 years ago. I started contributing by creating language packs for Mambo and Joomla and translating things, right? That's also you don't have to necessarily be a developer to be able to contribute to open source. And that's useful for. I mean, back then I also turned that into some kind of, during my study time, turned it into some kind of a side gig building websites for people. Then it's useful for me to contribute back to the community, because then the community gets to know me. I'm contributing things that actually help me. I mean, I was building websites for Dutch businesses, and then it's useful if you have a Dutch language pack, right? And then other people can benefit from that, and then they know you. And if they want business or to do business or want to have a website made, your name might pop up. So it's not necessarily a direct business that you're going to get out of it, but it's sort of marketing promotion that worked for me. But I mean, a lot of people also just enjoy doing it, right? It's a lot of hobby contributing to open source just because they find it interesting. And that's also a perfectly valid reason, I think, to contribute. And then the communities that form around that, in the early days, those were online. Those were mostly forums, I think. IRC before that, definitely. Chat rooms, IRC. Any channel that you can use for communication, or where you can get groups together, you can get some form of community. And I always love to combine that with real life meetings. It's nice to have a beer with someone and have a chat with someone in real life beyond just the digital stuff. And I think that combination is really powerful if you're building communities. So yeah, that's what it roughly looked like for me in those early days.
Yeah. Would it be fair to say that it was not early days internet, but it was definitely less sophisticated than it was now?
Mm-hmm.
I think also the documentation around most of the tools that we were using was non-existent, or at least scarce. So I think early communities were also heavily focused on basically answering questions, right? Or being able to ask a question, having someone else that already went through the pain and trouble, figuring it out, answering, sharing their insights.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a combination of building your own status, your reputation. Like you said, it's also necessity. If you don't have the documentation, and you don't know how something works, just ask someone how it works is the next best option. Whether that's for a hobby project or when you're in business, right? I mean, there's a lot of developers where we met with the Magento community. We had a lot of developers working on commercial projects that ran into issues and had no idea because there was no documentation or whatever, or no proper code commenting. Yeah, then the community is a very good way to get around that and to get to an answer faster.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because the community often is represented as this totally altruistic bunch of nerds spending their time for free with each other. But thinking back to the early days, there was a clear economic benefit to contributing, not just for the people involved, but also their employers. I had one that was happy to send me to conferences and what have you, and not just because I was bringing back cool T-shirts. So there was weirdly enough. So there was definitely an economic driver there, right?
Yeah, I mean, open source, of course, for most instances of open source, you cannot sell the software itself, but there's still a lot of services that you can sell. So yeah, you still need to support that in some way. And if you have clients that want you to build something, it's also very useful, of course, to immerse yourself in a community. If you're looking for new clients, clients can come from the community, but also if you have clients and that have new wishes, new features, new ideas that you have never seen before, it's very useful if you can go to a community and say, hey, this client wants X, Y, and Z. I've never done that. Can I just talk to someone about this? Is this a reasonable request by this client? Should I say no?
Yeah.
Maybe someone else built it and maybe they can share it, or maybe someone already shared it but you couldn't find it. And that's useful to be part of that community because it just expands your access to knowledge about. I mean, if it's not in documentation, not in your internal wiki or in the public documentation, it greatly expands what you can do with a project. So it's not just it's for the fun of it. We're not playing games. So there's still this economic driver behind it for a lot of those cases. But yeah, it's less directly linked. I think that's tricky when it comes to investing in community. And like you said, your employer sending you to a conference. I mean that those are hours that you cannot spend building a project that day, right? Or maybe even multiple days. So that's tricky for some companies then to make time for that and know, okay, who to send, how many people to send, how often to send. That's tricky. But yeah, I think overall, from what I've seen, a lot of companies really benefit from that. Even if it's just, I mean, we had a popular Magento hosting company in Amsterdam, and they were hosting a lot of events, and they greatly benefited from that. They had a great name in the Magento community. Got a lot of feedback from the Magento community because of that. Because of their that openness to that, I think that's made them one of the biggest Magento hosts in the Netherlands, and very successful because of their immersion in community. Yeah, it's not always obvious to companies or founders to do this.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe fast forwarding a little bit, I think we're both still involved in various communities, and what I've seen is that things have changed though. The dynamics within communities have changed, I would say. I'm not sure if I can put a finger on it per se, but there's definitely more of a what can I get out of it? Maybe less of a sharing. Not that there's not a willingness to share, but there's just less of that drive. Do you think AI has anything to do with that?
I think AI has a lot to do with that. Yeah. I mean, it affects it in multiple ways, I think. I mean, if you use AI a lot to get your answers, that means you're not ending up on a forum or on Stack Overflow where you previously would end up getting those answers. So there's this disconnect that you get. Now it's a machine answering you, still based on Stack Overflow or Reddit answers.
Right.
Or forum answers. Those were usually the place you end up, especially if you have a very a deep technical problem, or like I have this kind of network at home and this kind of printer, it's not working, very specific specs. It's usually a forum where you would end up getting those answers or hints at answers.
Yeah.
And you would see the people behind it. You would see a username or an avatar, and you would know there's people behind this. So this triggers your brain somewhat, and hey, there's people behind this. They put in efforts to have these answers, and also gets you to maybe answer back, even if it's not a perfect solution. It triggers you to provide answers to a thread that's already existing, saying, hey, this and this worked for me. This and this didn't work for me. Do you have any other ideas for a solution? You don't do that with an AI. I mean, you still tell the AI, hey, this didn't work or this did work to get you to the next point, but it doesn't end up in like a central knowledge base where other people can benefit from, right? So that's, I think, one thing that AI is causing. I also think like with AI, it really depends on the kind of community that you have. If AI has an impact on that, if it's very transactional in that I just wanted an answer and the forum gave that to me, that's at a higher risk, I think, of being replaced by AI than something that's more about the feeling of community and wanting to belong somewhere. If that's something that your community can also provide, that's much more sticky thing that AI cannot replace. And then there's, I think, the related thing that's with AI, the answers are now free, but the trust is expensive. You don't know where an answer comes from. It's really hard to judge if something, on a forum, you can see if this came from a moderator or from a user that already has a 10-year history on this forum. It depends on that person. Did they answer one question before, or did they answer 200 questions before on that forum? That informs you about the likelihood that their answer is any good to you, and that helps you judge. And even with the best intentions, that can help you make them trust that answer or trust that person less or more. And that's also completely killed off by AI. I think we've with AI generated answers. I mean, we also see AI generated answers pop up on forums, of course, or on Reddit or LinkedIn or wherever your community lives. I think the moment has passed where we can detect AI generated content from humans. If not today, then tomorrow, right? And whether that's text or
gets harder and harder,
or it gets infinitely harder to detect that. But on what you had with communities and forums, you didn't just judge it by the answer itself. You could judge it by what I just said. You can judge it by the person answering you. And I think that's still going to be much harder to fake by bots or by bot networks. It's really hard to fake like a 5-year history on a specific forum answering. And there's also less financial incentives for a bot to do so, right? I mean, for ChatGPT, it's useful to give you an answer now, not just to have saying, oh, but I have this whole history of posting and tricking you that way.
Agreed. And I think most people are using it to answer just to gain reputation because everyone knows that fake internet points are valuable. But yeah, I agree. And what I miss most maybe from that interaction is not just being able to ask a question and then getting an answer. But it's interaction, right? Because there have been plenty of times where I might have answered the question. Someone comes back and is like, fine, but that doesn't work for me. And this is what I'm actually seeing. I'm like, that's interesting. Okay, let me see if I can reproduce that or get it right and learn in the process. Whereas now that is less so. Maybe coming back to something that you said, that the part of having a feeling of belonging, that's more sticky. And I somewhat agree, maybe because some people are very happy to just chat with their ChatGPT all day long, but
or have relationships with them, yeah.
Right, therapy sessions even. But if you take that, the value of helping each other, of being able to ask questions and answer them, of presenting how you did something, right? Because it gets infinitely harder to build a whole slide deck for 30 minutes on how you solve something if the answer is, I asked ChatGPT and gave me a script. So if you take that out of a community, then what is left is a group of friends, I guess, right?
The parties.
But there is right. But I can also have that with someone down the street, right? So there's less of a intrinsic value to be had from that community. Do you think that holds?
Yeah. Depends on what the value is that you're looking for, right? I mean, if you're just looking for those answers, the ChatGPT will give them to you. If you're looking for that human connection, or like you said, if you want to learn something, I think what's the saying that the teaching is the best way to learn something. I think answering on a forum is a very close second. So if you want to learn something, there's all kinds of edge cases that you'll see on the forum. So if you really want to learn something about something, or solving problems, and then a forum is still very much the way to go. But it really depends on, do you have the time for that? Do you have the incentive for that?
Yeah.
Whether it's financial for your job or just intrinsic motivation from your hobby or your own interest, if you're still doing that. So a lot of communities are becoming more silent, but I do think that the people that maybe remain are more connected, and because those are the people that really share that common interest or that common drive for whatever that community is about. And to be fair, we had slop content before AI was around, right? We had people trying to just boost their forum account or Reddit account for the karma points, just by answering something or by, I don't know, reposting a meme from 5 years ago and just hoping no one knows about it again, or remembers it, and then get points that way. So that happened before AI, and I guess depending on the community, that now happens less or more. Stack Overflow definitely went down a lot, right? There's a lot. That's more of the transactional example of a community, I think, where you just you have a problem for your work. You go to Stack Overflow to find the issue and hopefully an answer, and then come back and go to your work and just solve it. You're not on Stack Overflow for the connection. You're just there to solve an issue. And if ChatGPT or whatever LLM you're using can do that for you, why go there? But if you love discussing the latest movie trends, good luck with an LLM. Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, it won't know about the latest movies, and it can tell you about reviews of what others are thinking about it. But if it can have access to internet, but it's not fun necessarily discussing things like the latest movie trends or whatever your hobby is with an LLM. Again, maybe depending on the person, but for a lot of people, that's not necessarily what they're there for. But Stack Overflow went down, I think within 2 years after launching of ChatGPT, it went down like 75%. And it's now even at less than 10 or maybe even less than 5% of its peak in 2014. So those communities are hit very hard, of course, specifically also because ChatGPT used that to train all their LLMs on. But there's also, I mean, Reddit is relatively stable in terms of activity. I'm not sure in terms of value. That's a different discussion. I mean, again, there's a lot of AI content on Reddit as well, but it's relatively stable, the activity on Reddit. So it really depends on and of course, there's a lot of subreddits that have different experience there. But you also see that in tech communities where there's a lot of connection, where it's more about that value and relationship building, and people see that value when they get clients, or where they see it's useful to be known in a community, to be asked for your new job or whatever. Especially in this job market, it really helps if you're known for your skills, and maybe even if the LLMs know about your skills because they index that for them, right? but you still need to post that content somewhere. You still need to make that make your knowledge known to the world somehow. And communities, open communities are great. Not Slack, but open communities are a great way of doing that.
Yeah, very true. And I think putting in that effort, right, that is what gets valued at the moment, right? Because we did see that whenever you would just be posting AI slop or slop in general, because I would agree that even before AI, we already saw some of the Stack Overflow subpages go down with too much slop content. If the effort becomes too cheap, then a community loses its value.
Yeah, they lose the trust in you, in your account. I mean, it's about the value that you're adding, I think. I mean, if your value add is, I typed this question into ChatGPT and here's the answer. I mean, yeah, everyone can do that right now.
I could have done that. Yeah, right.
Yeah,
exactly.
But if you're thoroughly researching something and then use ChatGPT to like reorder your thoughts or make it more legible or check your sources for a second time, things like that, and especially if you're posting to a forum that's or to a community that's maybe not in your native language, it helps to use tools like this to make your thoughts better known. I think there's nothing wrong with you using LLMs for that, but yeah, that's about the effort that you take. If it's a very good human AI collaboration, sure, there will be a lot of value in that potentially for a lot of people still. And then you can post it to a community, and if they see the value, your karma points can go up. But yeah, it's about that value, and that's a very subjective thing. Of course, it really depends. It depends on the community what they value. It depends on every single person on what they value. But yeah, just copy pasting whatever your LLM is generated from a single prompt is not really valuable.
Fair enough. Let's maybe look at the other controversial topic of communities. Love to handle the hot potatoes today. Big corporations and software vendors and their place in those communities, right? And I think big corporations in general, communities are something that grows in general. I would argue the most successful ones grow organically and are not sponsored, funded, or forced. I think corporations, vendors have always seen some value of being involved with communities. I think at times it has been very awkward relationships that they have had with their communities. You've been on that side, right? Is there a place for those corporations?
Yeah, I think you can greatly benefit from a community, but I think that like the field of, it's called community building, right? But I think that's kind of a misnomer, because like you said, a lot of communities they grow organically. So it's more like as a company, you can facilitate a community. You can see people, they're organizing an event. Yeah. Let's sponsor them. Let's help them out. Pay for the venue or the food at the event. And we see a community, they want to have meetups. Let's sponsor their meetup.com page. Have that centralized in a way so everyone can benefit from that. Maybe do fun things with swag beyond t-shirts. And there's a lot of things you can do as a community, I think, to facilitate. You can organize things yourself or help the people and companies in your network to organize things themselves, like have a blueprint for how events look like, for example. But yeah, it can be very messy or tricky too. I mean, with Magento, we had the Me Magento events, and that was somewhat condoned by Magento. We had founded the Magento Association, right, which was a separate entity, somewhat came from Adobe to set this up, but they're also not too involved, and also not. It took a long time to iron out all the details there, and it's tricky, especially. I mean, if the main corporation owns the brand, that in itself, especially if it's an American corporation, that's already a very tricky legal thing just to sort out. But I think there's a lot of corporations that are great examples of how they've embraced their community. There's a lot of Linux examples with, of course, Ubuntu being a huge one in community, really invested in community as well. There's maybe things like the CMSs, the Drupal, Joomla, they all benefited greatly from supporting a community, going to events a lot as a core team. Those show your support to the community. It doesn't even necessarily always have to be just giving money away, but just supporting them, giving them a place, maybe on your official website, recognizing those people. I mean, we had the Magento Master program, right, initiated from Magento by Sherry. Those are great programs that you can initiate as a corporate to show that you value your community members. And of course, core, especially if you're a tech product, make sure you have a proper flow from feedback from the community into your product team and the actual product. So what for example worked really well with Spryker was that we started with meetups, but that grew into regular hackathons that we organized on our own premises. And with partners and customers. And so we regularly had and at the end of my tenure, roughly a quarter of the total implemented roadmap features came from community hackathons, whether that's direct code or heavily inspired by community contributions. I think that's a great way to get community involved, even if it's small. I mean, Spryker was B2B e-commerce, right? That's not a huge that's not a huge market. We didn't have a very enterprise market, so it's not a huge community that we had. But still, if you get enough people that are motivated, that you can bring together and put in the right incentives, it can mean a lot for your company. It makes it easier to implement products. Even if it's not just direct product contributions, just the feedback alone. I mean, there's a lot of things that might go wrong in your product. If you have a complicated product, there's a lot of surface area to cover that your product team or your tech team might not even. I mean, if a feature is considered finished, they might not look at it anymore. So, and something else might either break it, or it might become irrelevant or superseded by something, and you might not even realize. If you have hopefully the community, usually by definition is a lot bigger than you are, so they see a little more use cases, so they can provide you with that feedback. That's super useful.
Yeah. Would it be fair to say that the best, let's say, symbiotic relationships are the ones where the economic interests of the ecosystem around the community are aligned with the corporation, the software vendor, right? What I see a lot in communities is that the corporation itself or the platform would love to sell more licenses. However, especially in some communities or in some geographies, there are no licenses to be sold, right? And then when that doesn't align, there tends to be a bit of an awkward relationship.
Yes, we had that with Adobe as well. With Magento as well, right? I mean, there's a lot of misalignment also with Magento in the beginning. They were also doing projects themselves. So then you have a tension between, so Magento sees all the projects and they get to choose. We pick out all the cherries, and whatever we don't want goes to the community, and they can build those projects. And also with licenses that we saw. Huge targets for Magento people in Europe, where, I mean, the budgets here are for e-commerce back then much smaller. The markets are just a lot smaller, right? I mean, if you start a shop in the US, you cover a whole of US and probably part of an international market if you want to, just because you're in English and a lot of people can read that and reach your shop. Yeah, if you start a web shop in Dutch with Ideal, you don't have a huge market. I'm not saying it's not valuable. I mean, I'm not saying it's not a good market or good business, but it's not the order of magnitude that then Magento is looking for to sell licenses for. So that's a huge tension, and similar to things like extensions. I think that you see that with a lot of products where, if you have an extension system, there will inevitably be a tension where you want to build something into the core, something that a community member may already have built as an extension and maybe are greatly benefiting from, maybe even selling it. And I mean, in Magento, we had companies dedicated to building extensions for Magento, right? Multiple even, and doing good business with that. If you then build that into your core product, you're killing their business, or at least part of their business. So those are tensions that you definitely need to be aware of as a corporate. That's not something to take for granted, and that can definitely, I mean, those things can ruin a community. And lately we've also seen examples of that, where corporations change the license of their products, and that can quickly kill products or communities. And communities can switch. I mean, it's not impossible for community. I saw it. That was my first experience with Mambo. I think it was with Mambo for like half a year or something, and then everything turned upside down, and everyone moved to Joomla, and there was a whole new name and no more the backing of this company, and then that's super weird. And with Magento, saw it. Well, they had different companies taking over with eBay and venture capital, and then Adobe. That changed a lot, but that didn't necessarily change. But now with different spin-offs, we also see people joining different like sub communities. With what's the caching solution again? I use Valky. What was the
Redis? Yeah.
Forgot the name. So that also switched over to a new system. You get a couple of big backers for your project, and everyone can almost switch overnight. Elasticsearch had an issue with
OpenSearch,
right? So there's examples there. So you cannot really. I do think communities, having a strong community is one of the best moats that you can have as a company. I mean, a competitor can copy your product one to one, but it doesn't mean they instantly have your market share, right? Or your revenue. Community is a very sticky thing, but it's not impossible for communities en masse to decide, fuck you, we don't like what you're doing, and you completely thrown away the premise of why we believed in you as a product. If you throw that away, you still cannot take that for granted. And then there's a lot of things inhibiting that. A lot of systems that your community might be on or might be using that make it hard to move away. But don't mistake something being hard for something being impossible.
Yeah, often these communities are very good at adapting, right? That is the whole premise. They build their own tooling around your product and what have you, and they can also move that.
Yeah.
So you've now maybe more than ever.
Yeah, exactly. But you've watched the vendors struggle communities or try to do communities long time, right? So what's your worst example of community or company fucking up?
Oh gosh, that's a good question. I'd need to think about it. I mean, I think many companies, including Adobe, including Shopware, have faced backlash from their communities the moment that the relationship became less symbiotic, right? And less about, okay, this is how we both can extract equal value out of the ecosystem, towards at least the community maybe perceiving that they are sponsoring an enterprise product, right? I think that is kind of the tipping point where a community tends to turn sour. And I think with the Magento community, we now see that MageOS is gaining more and more support, which is a fork of the free and open source product, since that free and open source product is no longer maintained by Adobe, right? And I think I wouldn't say it's the worst example. I think it's the most obvious example of the community at the end of the day choosing for itself, and the ecosystem choosing for itself, because the greatest value is to be had from a platform that arguably, if it can be maintained by the community, then why shouldn't the community own it? I think that is often the tipping point.
Yeah, and I think Magento is a great example of showing how sticky a community can be, and how a community product can be, because how Adobe took over Magento in 2000, over 10 years ago. And they didn't invest in it at all in the community edition. They just they integrated Magento Enterprise into their product lineup, and basically it became Adobe Commerce. The product basically vanished, and they didn't do anything to return. They didn't invest anything in community, despite what they were saying when they took it over. But because you have this huge, I mean, I think at some point Magento had like a quarter or a 20% market share of e-commerce shops. That doesn't go away overnight. And same with things like Joomla. I mean, even if the core team steps away and doesn't do anything for years, or there's no real traction for years, or a lot of indecisiveness, that's also what you see in communities. It doesn't go away overnight, especially if you have these installs, if you have this. That's also what I mean with the community is a very good moat, and people just don't move systems from one day to the other usually, unless again Valky. Some of those examples is because the company made a really bad decision that went against a lot of beliefs of community people, and then you see those large shifts. But with Adobe and with Magento and Joomla, it's more like sort of indecisiveness. There's not really a single bad decision or an announcement that makes everyone angry. It's just nothingness for a long time, and then it can take a very long time. With MageOS or all the other alternatives, they didn't happen at the instant Adobe bought Magento, right? So there was still hope. There were positive messages from leadership. There were positive messages from Adobe. So there's less incentives, also financial incentives for like if I would be an agency building on Magento, I still have hope in the path of the current vendor. Then I'm going to stick to that. I'm not going to put my eggs in the basket of some unknown alternative system that's currently also just a fork that's basically the same features. Why would I, right? So that's, I think, how those different systems or different communities behaved and why they behaved the way they do.
Yeah, I think a good example of that is MySQL and MariaDB, right? MySQL owned by Oracle. They changed the license. Nothing really changed, let's be honest. Nothing really changed. Yet everyone sees it as a risk. And as such, slowly MariaDB has been gaining a lot of traction to the point where I think they are one of the sponsors or maybe even a headline sponsor for Magento Czech Republic.
Nice.
This month, right? So, and I think they do get it right? Because they have an open source product, or more or less open source, free to use, lower tier, and they offer professional services and professional products for enterprise, right? And that symbiosis is much healthier, I think.
Yeah.
So it's
and I mean, and to be fair, it's also open sourcing your product does come with business challenges. You do need, I think, the community is basically the way to go, I think, for an open source product, if you want to have a healthy ecosystem and monetize it. But that's you do need, ironically, you would need some more money up front to be able to do this, invest this in the long run, and make that work for you. It's easier to have a closed source product in the short run and make money out of that than with an open source product, because the whole services around that, it's harder, it takes longer to build, and it's harder to build. But yeah. Good to see that a lot of them are still are thriving. Yeah, but I mean, in the grand scheme of things, there's a lot more open source products that are not thriving and that are having a hard time. Also, again, because of AI, that are closing down, not necessarily the open source part, but also closing down like community contributions because it's just not feasible to manage all the PRs they're getting. Again, people just basically karma farming on GitHub, letting Fable run wild on a couple of open source repositories, look for security issues or any issues really, and then sending in hundreds of PRs that need to be manually reviewed by open source maintainers. Yeah, that's also not feasible. So that's also another tricky thing that needs a solution.
Maybe to summarize a bit. So a community cannot be managed. A community cannot be bought. It cannot be built in the traditional sense. I think it does need to grow, right? And the community need a sustained economic interest, right? That ecosystem needs to be able to extract some value out of it, apart from stickers, t-shirts, and cool events.
The creator / vendor and the community itself.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe looking forward a little bit. Very broad question. Will communities stay around, or will we just all sit behind our desk and talk to ChatGPT?
I know. Are you still part of some communities?
Yes, I am. Again, I don't know why I keep saying yes, but yes, I am. No, so yes, I am, and I love being involved. But I love mostly being involved with the communities where we have a relationship based on how we used to be. Right. So people that I can meet. So now and then we sit down, we talk a little bit about the good old times, and we talk a little bit about how we see the current state of things, and how we are maybe developing a new product or new thoughts and that kind of stuff. So there's still very much a reciprocal relationship and very much about sharing ideas, coming up with new perspectives. I am finding more and more that in new communities, I am less interested or relying more on AI, right? Yep. I don't have a precedence for going to a forum until such a moment that there is no forums anymore and the models are not trained on quality answers, and we'll need to go back to a forum, I guess.
I hope so. Yeah, again, for that connection there's a lot of things that an AI still cannot give you with the trust. Like you say, you want to hear it from people that you trust, that you know, that they live through, and that they have a stake in the things that they're saying. Like an AI doesn't have any stake in being right or wrong. It just gives you an answer. I mean, ChatGPT, of course, the companies behind those LLM hope to create a product that gives right answers.
Yeah.
Still, there's no stake in it being right or wrong. If you want to discuss or if you're curious about what the market is doing, how other people are handling it, AI or otherwise, you want to talk to people that have a stake in it and see, okay, how are they investing? How are they spending their time? And maybe as a developer, what does AI mean for me? Does my work still exist in 5 years? Sure, you can ask AI. Does that mean anything? Does it have any relation to reality? You want to talk to people. And again, people are just people and they might give you a wrong answer as well. But if you talk to a lot of people at conferences regularly, you can form your own idea about what's actually happening and how people are handling those stakes. I mean, if it's about your livelihood, I think you don't want to ask AI, does my job still exist in 5 years? And then just go off on whatever the answer is. You want to look at what other people are doing. And again, that might be wrong, but you can at least form your own opinion and judge if that applies to you, to your situation. And maybe use AI for that. Maybe do all the interviews, write that down, and then feed that into an AI and combine with your situation and then ask it, does it make sense for me to go in that direction or not? Maybe that's where AIs can be useful, but not in forming those opinions in the first place. And again, it's very much about the stakes, and it also applies a bit to form answers. Again, the reputation, the stakes. If someone's staking their reputation on telling you something, especially if it's about controversial stuff, and they're staking their reputation on saying, "Hey, this is not the way we should do this as a community." This is, I mean, sometimes you have these people hopefully you have some of these people in your community. We all know them that are very vocal but you trust them, or you at least know about them because they are staking their reputation on what they're saying and saying, hey, this is what we should do with the community, and we should go in that direction because this is my experience. No AI can really replace those discussions, I think.
Yes,
because again, there's no stake in the AI, and the AI will probably flip flop their opinion anyway if you push it enough, or based on your I don't know, your agent.md how it's set up. And that's not very useful. You want to have the controversy. You want to have the different opinions. And yes, you can instruct your LLM to create different personas, but that's just not the same because the total lack of stakes. Yeah.
I think community will definitely change. I think it will change also it becomes more productized, and I would love to get your idea on that. And we're already seeing that, right? This is partly driven by AI, SpaceX buying Cursor, right? That is not because they need a coding agent. That is because they need access to the collective coding that millions of developers are doing to have training data. That is Atlassian sending out blog posts that they're now offering. I don't know how they phrase it, but basically all of your Jira tickets and all of that data is now going to be training data for us to use. You can opt out. Let's see how long that is, right? But we're already seeing more and more any place where people still input original thoughts and what have you are not only siloing that, but are also turning it into training data, right? I mean, LinkedIn will already be doing that. And what have you.
I love how all these companies also the reasoning. Yeah, we make it opt out, and because if we make it opt in by the beginning, then no one would opt in. Yes, right. Correctly. That's.
So do you think that this will ultimately, and this is very hypothetical, will also drive a renaissance of community, where we at some point might get tired, not even of the AI slop, but of the fact that we are so heavily productized and we become the training, we become the product, right? That there will be something going against that?
Well, let's hope so. I'm partially building it myself, or trying to build it. So those are my stakes, right? Now, so what I'm very interested for that reason in the 8080 protocol and how that's being set up. And most people will know that from the semi-successful Twitter clone. But I think the underlying protocol is way more interesting than just Blue Sky and what they're building with it. And it's a bit hard to explain how AD protocol works because it goes against a lot of things and how we are used to doing social media. It's so different that it's hard to go against all your expectations of what another social media platform is. With AD protocol, you have, to be clear, I'm not building AD protocol. That's not what I'm building. I'm building something on AD protocol. But to explain that, AD protocol is a protocol where you as a user, you have a single account for multiple services. So you might think, okay, yeah, we already have a single sign-on with Google or Facebook or whatever you use for a single sign-on. That's already a thing you know. But the difference is that you also you have a lot of people say in ad product you own your own data, but I mean that doesn't really mean anything to a lot of people because you feel like you own your own data, right? I mean, I put it on LinkedIn, so it's my data, but it lives on their servers. And with AD protocol, basically all your data from all the apps you use live in a single place. And currently you can host it anywhere. You can have that hosted by Blue Sky, or there's a couple of hundreds people already providing that as a service. You can move it around, and you can still keep that same account. And it's also linked, the verification is linked to the DNS system. So you can link that to your domain, so something you own. If you own the domain, you can use that as a username. My username on the AdProto network is GUI.do because that's my personal website and the domain that I own. That's and regardless of where that data lives, it's one of the super interesting things about AD protocol. So right now in the beginning, everything is also open. So all the data in that personal data service that you have is something that is accessible to all apps. And they're currently also quite far into building what they call permission data, so private data. But right now, everything is open. And that means that I can build an app that's similar or even fork the Blue Sky app. And I can give it my name and give it my own layout or whatever rules that are in there. But it gets the data from the same AD protocol network. So on day one, I have all the data. And for Blue Sky is specifically microblogging, but another interesting feature is that you can determine your own lexicon, as they call it in ad protocol. So you can also create a lexicon for articles, or you can create a lexicon for videos, or for audio, or for a CV, or a forum, right? So you can determine that all by yourself. And then others can again read that. So what I started with specifically was imagining. So that was like half a year ago, end of last year, when I started imagining, okay, what would a forum, what would a community look like on AD protocol beyond the microblogging? And I think it will be super. We spoke about karma points and trust and value, trust and reputation, right? So, but if you have a single account, you can go to a new community and you can bring all your content. You can bring your reputation with you. That has great benefits for you as a user, and because you don't have to start all over again on the forum. I mean, that's one of the downside of starting or creating a new account in a new community. You need to start all over again. Which on that product, to be clear, you can still do that if you want to. You just create a new account, but you can bring a previous account to a new forum, and it also has benefits to the forum owner because they know where you're coming from and if you are likely an AI or a bot network or more of a human. And I think that's where AD protocol becomes very interesting. We previously spoke about it's already we've passed the point where we can detect individual AI pieces of content, but on an account level, that's much harder. If you then have accounts that you can bring to multiple websites, any service where you can log in with that account, you can bring that reputation with you, your 5-10 year history, and that value to your new friends. So that's what I started with building on that product. So I have I built basically proof of concept for a forum. So it's basically discourse, less features of course, basically discourse on AdProto, and it's open source. People can start using that. But that's basically started getting me thinking about, okay, how does trust and reputation then work in this new world? And that's basically scope creeps into building a Sifa.id, which is, I guess, the most common comparison would be LinkedIn on AdProto. So you build your CV, but it can also ingest any activity on AdProto network or even beyond. It can ingest your GitHub activity. It can ingest any RSS feed. It can ingest for academics. It can ingest ORCID publications. But it's all verifiably you. But it still mostly claims that you make about yourself, same as on LinkedIn. So on LinkedIn and also on Sifa.id today, you can just claim, you can just say, okay, I'm the CEO of Nike. Okay, yeah, that doesn't mean anything to anyone, right? But the thing on NetProto is that these different personal data servers, so all these different accounts that you have, they can say something about another account. So you can create something of a web of trust that some of you might be familiar with. So you can confirm yourself that you work somewhere by confirming your company email address, for example, because I know what Microsoft.com, what their email addresses look like. So I can confirm that you work there. But your colleagues can also confirm that you work there. Your manager can confirm that you work there. Someone from HR can confirm that you work there. And you can do that, those confirmations, that web of trust, you can do that for each record. So you can do that for your career. You can do that for past items. You can do that for education. You can do that for the courses that you follow, the skills that you have. So that way you can have in a single account, and regardless of what kind of content that you publish or that you're interested in, whether you're an artist creating videos or a photographer or a scientist, you can have a single account where you can have different layers of trust, all time-stamped. And I think that would greatly help in regaining that trust in the human connection in what people are doing, and trying to rebuild an open social web, and that we can all rely on again beyond just the corporate. And the what's also so different, I guess, for people to understand, even if you put all your data on Sifa, if I die tomorrow, all my servers die tomorrow, all that data is still in your PDS, because that's not on my data servers. And
that's so powerful, right?
Yeah,
because if LinkedIn shuts down tomorrow, then I don't have a CV anymore, right? Exactly. And all those wonderful tasks that I've written for years
everything is gone, and others can still build upon that. So there are people right now that just use basically the Sifa lexicon to build other applications. So someone built a resume builder where you can put in like a resume that you're applying for, and it looks at your Sifa, all your Sifa records, and it builds a custom CV tailored for that job that you made. Other people are ingesting their Sifa records from their personal data servers into their own website to build like a CV page. And you can do the same. There's also something I do on my website. If you go to gui.do/now or /bookshelf, there's also like a Goodreads alternative on NetProto. I can just ingest that because it's my data. But that's so different from how the current social media works. And current social media, the trend that I'm seeing is with all of them, they're locking more and more down. Twitter already doesn't have an API. LinkedIn, you won't get into the API. Everything is very closed. While especially for things like your CV, the whole idea of putting your CV on LinkedIn is for people to see it, right? You're not putting it in there for yourself. You want to find a new job, or want recruiters to see it, or others to see it. And that's why I think it makes sense to build this on the open web. There's a lot of use cases for private data within that still. You could, when we have permission data, you could, for example, add your day rate or your salary wishes, and specifically share that with a with recruiter, for example. The nice thing, it becomes like this single source of truth for all your data. Like, for example, if you add your current employer to Sifa, similar to, you may know, Gravatar. So there's a single source of truth for, and all those websites can use your avatar, right? NetProto enables you to do that for all your data. So if you have a single point where you add, oh, this is my employer, all the other apps can use that. If Blue Sky decides tomorrow, we want to include someone's employer on their Blue Sky profile, they can just fetch it from Sifa, from your PDS, and then show it that way. And I think that's a very cool way of building these apps. And I think another example that I'm not building, I'm discussing it with a couple of people, and I think you are very familiar with it, Sander, are conference networking apps.
Yeah.
Right? A conference networking app, the whole purpose is that you can connect with people, but the downside is every conference has its own app. So basically, I'd love these apps to be useful. I'd love to network. That maybe that's just me. That might not be the majority, but I love to go to conferences and network with people. But I do not love when I need to set up my whole profile. I basically need to sometimes just manually enter my experiences, my skills, where I work, what I'm interested in. I'm not going to do that every time for every conference. That's a lot of work. But on AdProto, you can add that data to your personal data service. It might already be there if you have something like a Sifa profile. And then if a conference builds an app on that, they can pull that data with your permission if you want to lock it down. But otherwise, if it's public, then they can just pull it anyway. And then the only thing I need to do is log into this conference app, and it can tell me, hey, these are your colleagues or friends that are already going to this event. These are a former colleague, if you want to catch up. These are former colleagues that are going to these events. It can tell you, hey, based on your interests or your current projects, these are the, 5 to 10 people that you really need to meet at this event. Because, if events have hundreds or thousands of people, I'm not physically able to meet that many people at an event.
Yeah. Well,
so it can directly do that.
And equally, right, I can see if someone is trying to hide the fact that they're just sales, right? Trying to get an appointment, or me, or someone that is genuinely interested in what I'm doing and wants to exchange ideas, right? Because I've had that before at conferences where they're like, oh, I'd love to discuss whatever. And then you go into a 20-minute sales pitch that you cannot extract yourself from, right? And owning those trust signals, right? Being able to own those trust signals, but also being able to verify those trust signals, I think that is very powerful. That is something that currently with most communities, at least online, is completely missing.
Yeah, there's no distinction between it's hard to make a distinction between the bot networks and the real people, but also between real people.
Yeah,
it's still about who can provide value to me in this moment, in my valuable time at this conference that maybe only lasts a day. Who should I really talk to? Who should I avoid? And if they connect with me, that you can already see what their reputation is, and also make that personal. I do think that I haven't figured that out yet with Sifa how the exact mechanics will be of the trust and reputation layer. I think it's because it's so context dependent. Like, do you remember? Yeah. I think that like 15 years ago, we had cloud. So you connected your Twitter, your Facebook, your Foursquare. You connected to that. You got a single score saying how popular you are, right? But I think that totally breaks down if you switch context. So if I go and people can have multiple contexts, right? I can go from an HTML form to a CSS form, and to the CSS form, it might be very useful to bring on some karma from that HTML form or some trust that you build there, because it's very similar skills, very similar. But if the next day I go to a car mechanics forum, they don't care about my skill set in HTML or CSS. I will start from the bottom, right? But they can still verify that I made valuable contributions in another community. They might not value the knowledge or skill set that I have, but they might value that I brought value to another community in the answers that I gave. So that's something that you can bring with you, and that's very context dependent. So I think for Sifa, the trust and reputation layer will very much be like providing all the trust signals, and then make something that makes consuming those trust signals easy in your context, so that you can make it relevant for your community or for your purpose. But yeah, let's see how that pans out.
Yeah, exactly. So putting the trust back in the community. Yep. Guido, thank you so much for walking us through the community, the early days, how AI and corporates are impacting it, and hopefully what the future is of community. Hopefully a trustful one.
This was Thank you for being on the show.
Right? Yes, we were right on.
Awesome. Hey, thank you so much for inviting me. It's been a joy to talk to you again. So
thank you.